I'm Mark Teglin, President and CEO of Calvin Community. Calvin is a faith-based, not-for-profit retirement community providing a continuum of care in Des Moines' Beaverdale neighborhood. For more than 50 years, Calvin has offered individualized care by a team of dedicated professionals. As part of our mission to serve older adults, we have partnered with several community, business, and not-for-profit organizations and 6 professional experts. This program is brought to you by Calvin Community and American Enterprise Group with support from the Comparison Project at Drake University, Broadlawns Medical Center, Cultivating Compassion, the Dr. Richard Deming Foundation, Arbor Springs, AARP, Westminster Presbyterian Church, and Polk County Board of Supervisors, and additional support from Syverson Strege Company, Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center, Des Moines Area Religious Council, and HCI Care Services. In this session, David Strege, a managing partner at Syverson Strege Company, covers the impact of aging on financial decision-making, 5 warning signs that you're running into issues on how to handle finances, and practical steps that can provide a way to protect the family wealth.
Good evening. We're going to cover 3 parts on this economic security part. The first is, as Mark mentioned, the National Endowment for Financial Education. We'll then go into the 5 warning signs that you're running into decision-making issues on how to handle finances. And then the last part will go into some practical steps that can be applied so you have a way to help protect the family wealth. And that's really what this is all about. Because what we're going to find is that we're all having a cognitive decline. Doesn't matter who we are, our age, it's slowly going downhill is what we'll talk about. And then one of the key themes of that is how to solve that is communication. And so we're going to talk through some of those communication areas and what you have to do. This is the research that the National Endowment for Financial Education provided a grant for. We call it the Columbia University study, but in the front cover they'll go through the number of universities that were involved with this study. And so what they went through is they split intelligence into 2 areas. The first one is they talk about fluid intelligence. And what you see is on this chart here, from age 20 on, almost all areas of intelligence is declining. So it's going down. The only area that's gone up some is vocabulary over the years. From age 20 on, it's a decline of able to handle mathematical calculations in your mind, memory, all those things. Well, what they find is what's the impact, and what the study went into is how do you compensate for this? So we'll cover that because as you have more financial literacy, it does make a difference in the amount of money in your pocket. And so what this goes through is they just use a credit score. Those that have financial wisdom, can make smart decisions, have high financial literacy, then they can improve their credit score. So in this one example, this one output, the higher the credit score is affected by the number of standard deviations, how much variation occurs as you improve that financial literacy. And what that does is it gives you an example of the lower monthly payments on a 30-year mortgage as you have a higher credit score because you can have a lower interest rate. So that's just one of the financial impacts of why attending sessions like this helps you, because you have to compensate for fluid intelligence decline. What the study also went into is how do you compensate for that? And what they have is they came up with what's called crystallized intelligence. So crystallized intelligence is as you're living life, you have experiences, you gain different knowledge in areas on how to compensate for that. It's the same thing as physically as we get older. We tend to also compensate that we're not able to move as fast. We tend to take smaller steps. Okay? So that's how we adapt physically as we lose eyesight, hearing, some of the mobility and flexibility we had in our bodies. Same thing's occurring in what they called crystallized intelligence. Well, over the time period you see in the gray there, the crystallized intelligence is actually going up as we gain those experiences and we are able to learn from that. And so we're able to start compensating for that difference. So that financial literacy is improving. So still that 60, 65-year-old, 70-year-old, as they gain those experiences and they understand it and can apply it, they're going to make wiser financial decisions than a 20 or 30-year-old. Even though the fluid intelligence can't calculate as fast, don't have quite the memory recall, they're actually still able to outperform because of that gain of experience. This chart's a little bit more complicated, but what they try to do here is the brighter yellow line is the example as all these different factors are going on, financial literacy is able to increase over time. So they're able to compensate, able to handle that, and that higher financial literacy is able to help with, in the example they use, credit scores, so you have less on interest rates on loans. So what we have to look at is as we have that decline in fluid intelligence, that increase in crystallized intelligence, unfortunately we do run into a plateau. Normally what they found in the study is between 60 and 80 we start plateauing on crystallized intelligence. We're not gaining as much experience, we're not actively trying to learn as much. And as we get to that plateau, now the crystallized intelligence isn't keeping up with the decline in fluid intelligence. So now we start running into difficulties, and that's where we'll talk about the warning signs when we start running the declines of cognitive impairment and we're not making as wise a decisions as we used to. So what I'm going to show you is, since we all have to admit that we're going to have a decline in fluid intelligence, then this movie is available out there. It's in the handout packets. The sum total movie is a 53-minute movie that is, you can purchase it online. So my partner John Syverson's here, and John and I have been doing personal financial planning for about 35 years. And we've worked with clients that started with us 35 years ago and now they've aged, and so we've dealt with a lot of these problems, all the way from dementia to Parkinson's to a lot of other health issues that we have to work through and prepare for with those clients. What we're going to talk now about is, from this research and experiences, is what are some of the warning signs that some help is needed with personal finances. First one we talk about is it takes longer to complete financial tasks. One of the videos that we didn't have permission to play is, in this study they take a video of a person trying to have 5 bills, 5 checks, 5 envelopes, and they have to pay them. And the struggle this person went through trying to put the right check in the right envelope to get it properly paid with the proper check. So that's a sign that it's struggling. Now we're all it's gonna take longer, you know, it just seems like it takes longer and longer, but we have to realize that there's a point we may need more help. Then also, if we start missing details, bills aren't getting paid. Children come over and say, well, Mom or Dad, why is this bill still here from 3 months ago? Oh, I'll get to it one of these days. Well, it's looking at why is that there. Or the other case is a bill comes, they pay a magazine subscription, and they're notorious for continuing to bill for it, and all of a sudden they turn around and they're writing another check for the same bill they've already paid. That's some warning signs that you need to have somebody, and that's why we're going to talk about communication, of having somebody to help check what's going on. Everyday arithmetic. Now this one's scary, of even simple things like calculating a tip. Okay, it seems like, well, I could do it very easily. Now I kind of have to round up and make the waiter or waitress happy. Okay, so this is going to be good. So, and realizing that this is happening already. This has happened to us for decades now. As we get older, we're struggling with arithmetic, but when we get to the point when we can't do it anymore, then we have to realize that's a warning signal. Also understanding financial concepts. So even simple ones, but when we start running into the inability to understand Do I have a will? Do I have a power of attorney? What is that? Some of the things we're going to talk about and will be covered next month. When they start not understanding the differences between those tools available or how they apply or what they're for, that's a sign that there's some issues there. Now, it's kind of like when I go to a doctor and they give me a prescription and I can't pronounce the prescription, the drug they've prescribed, let alone, try to figure out what it is. So it's a different terminology, but we have to try to remember what's its purpose, what is this for, and is that a sign we're starting to run into problems there. The last one is probably the scariest, and this is what typically where they realize they need to bring in other family members or other assistants. What starts happening is when we get to the point where now it's harder to identify risk. And that's why scams or fraud on the aging is so prevalent anymore. So, and we've had a number of stories in our own client base. We've had my mom's neighbor, she had to help avoid a scam. And one of the most popular ones is, Grandma, this is your oldest grandson. I'm in jail in New York or Italy or Germany. I need $10,000 for bail. Can you go do and get this prepaid credit card and send this number to this phone number? Well, you sound different. Well, I've got a cold. Okay. And all of a sudden they go and they start making those payments. They're not, because of the relationship desire at that point, they want to help and they're not identifying the fraud. So they very easily get caught up on that. Now, fortunately, the state of Iowa Attorney General will help with that, can help people work through when frauds are occurring, and you have to stay aware of that. But that's more and more frauds occurring, whether it's fraudulent fundraising, again, that desire to help, good-heartedness of people, they're stepping up and help, okay? So the classic case is, if you get a call like that, or people to get a call like that, the common I'm in jail fraud is, well, let's call the family. And now the caller said, don't call anybody else, I'll be embarrassed. So they're again playing on the emotions. Just say, let's call the family, let's see where the grandson or granddaughter's at. And most of the time they say, well, they're right here sleeping on the couch. Oh, okay. So that's the problem we run into, and where now the family's saying, well, why are you paying out such large amounts of money? Because they've been scammed, okay? So we run into those items that start identifying warning signals. And so what we have to deal with is we're going to just give you some tips. This is a topic that we can go on a long time about. We'll have some time for question and answers at the end that we'll go through and help any specific other topics you have. Just like this whole series, the Embrace Aging series, there's so much to cover here. That's why it's going to take months and months to get through these topics. Fortunately, it's online to be able to go back and help other people become aware of it, because at 10,000 people a day turning age 65, we have a big need, as they talked about in the video, more and more people aging. So the 5 steps that as people reach age 50 is visit with your spouse or partner on specific topics we'll cover, get your financial house in order, check your paperwork, assign roles out there, and seek professional assistance. So visit with your spouse and partner. And here's a chance to talk about your lifestyle, to establish some ground rules for yourself of what do you envision happening, what are triggers. It's better to make these decisions while you're healthy and able to identify these things and start bringing in the assigned roles later on. But start out with, if you have a partner or spouse, start having those discussions. What are important to you? What do you want to do? What do you want to see? If you're going to give a lot to charity, let people know that here's a charity, and if I'm writing large checks to it, here's why. It is not out of the ordinary. That's some of the purpose if they've identified it as such in their life. So have those discussions, even if it's a friend. If you're not married, sit down with a friend. Have somebody that you can count on. Exchange those dreams and issues in your life to work through that. What do you want your life to be? Where do you want to enjoy it? And what do you want to avoid? So there'll be things next month that we'll talk about briefly today on end-of-life issues, prolongation of life, that you have to make those determinations. We'll also talk about some triggers of when do you give up driving? When do you move into a residential place like a Calvin community? When do you make those decisions? When are you going to get into a retirement community? So if you start establishing that vision out there, things are going to change. Things can happen rapidly from any number of medical or mental issues can develop. And if you have it laid out ahead of time saying, if this happens, here is where I prefer to go because I'm familiar with the facility, I enjoy it, or here's the lifestyle that I'm looking for. So get your financial house in order. And so what it happens is, just imagine, if you've not ever had to experience this, just imagine somebody coming into your house and trying to figure out how you pay bills, where your bills are at, where your bank accounts are at, where your investments accounts are at, where your tax files are at, where your legal documents are at, and if they have no clue. Okay, my dad died in 1997, we didn't know where the will was. My mom goes, well, he had talked to an attorney in Walla Walla, Washington, because they were living in Kennewick. You know how many law firms are in Walla Walla, Washington? I now know. So I was calling every law firm. Finally get to the 20th law firm. Yep, I talked to your dad. We didn't change the will. Well, that didn't solve a problem. They'd lived in Omaha, got a hold of a law firm in Omaha that fortunately had the original will. Now, most law firms won't hold the wills anymore, and that's why, because they're at liability and people have moved so far, it's hard to find out date of death. So getting it simplified so somebody can come in and more easily handle and understand the finances. So it's consolidated accounts. We've run into situations where there's 27 different brokerage accounts. Now you imagine the statements you just get from banks, now start multiplying that towards more and more brokerage accounts, all the paperwork, all the prospectuses, all the records that you're trying to decipher and understand. If you can start consolidating, simplifying that, where and how you store records. Now you can get more and more digital, so it reduces space, but if you've got a file cabinet, where is it at? Where's the key to the file cabinet? Where's the safety deposit box? Those are all things you've got to capture and be able to communicate. Okay? And so you have to start laying that out now in the day of computer age and passwords. So where do you keep your computer passwords? So if you're doing more and more of your financial transactions online banking and that, where do you store those? And how do you let somebody know in a secure way where it's at if it's ever needed and what's the way to get in that list? So I've got an encrypted file that takes a password to get into it, so I only have to tell them, here's where that file is, here's what it's named, and here's the encrypted name to get in that file. Okay? So you've got to let people know, especially those that we're going to name later with certain powers. Because unfortunately, we have to start trusting people to help out. Now we can have people check up on them, okay? But we got to have where that's at. And getting to the point of automatic bill paying. I mean, in the age of automation and technology, we can get more and more with the phone bill, the house payments. I mean, most everything we can have automatically paid, but that's why knowing where the bank's at, if it's online banking, how do they get in and stop those payments if a disability occurs, an incapacity, or a death? How do they go in and start making those changes and stopping them when they no longer need to be paid? And getting the financial house in order. A couple tools to keep in mind. So one is, one of the sponsors is ARP. ARP does have very good materials at arp.org. So they've got a great book on preparing to care, if you're a caregiver, which is this whole series been about. So there are tremendous materials out there that ARP has available at arp.org. Also the National Endowment for Financial Education, NEFI is the acronym for it. They have a free site also called Smart About Money. And they go all the way from the high school program, young people, all the way through past and through retirement. So those are all resources that you're trying to find, how do I do it? Because there's a lot of different ways. We can spend a lot of time just trying to figure out how to get the financial house in order. Again, it's where is it at and communicating that. So checking the paperwork. Some of the important documents. A lot of our population still does not have a will. So the state of Iowa determines how your assets are going to pass. So if you want to have the ability to direct where your assets go upon your death, a will is needed. Okay? If you want to help reduce probate or have privacy of your personal situation, you can try to have your assets owned by a revocable living trust. You will still have a will. The will will say anything I forgot to put in my revocable living trust will go into my revocable living trust to determine how it's going to be distributed. Okay, so what's called a pour-over will if I do have this revocable living trust. So this makes the work more upfront. There's still work when death occurs with a will or a revocable living trust. It's just a little bit easier, smoother, and a little bit more private with a revocable living trust, but the executor or successor trustee is still going to have things to do. Now, during life, we're going to want to have a couple documents in place. And this is when we're going to start talking about signing roles out there. And so one of the decisions you have to make is if I can no longer make financial decisions, who's going to take over my financial life? Who am I going to assign? And that's going to be your financial power of attorney. What's going to be the triggering point is typically a physician decision on that you're not able to make those decisions, and that person can take over. You can also voluntarily surrender also if the burden's too great. So the financial power of attorney is the financial decision making. You also have the medical power of attorney for medical decisions if you're not able to make that. So you've got those couple of documents. Living will is about prolongation of life guidance. On the internet there is the 5 wishes document, which as I understand it is allowable and enforceable in Iowa also, is another way to express this. So again, working with an attorney on this and then laying out for your family. So those that have gone through a death in your family and you were responsible for the funeral, the estate, you're the executor, you were handling finances before that if they were in hospice, you know it's a big burden. And unfortunately, in a very emotional time period, you're having to make hundreds and hundreds of decisions. So we have a site called Estate Manager Pro on our website, which helps people day by day, week by week, what are the steps that need to happen, even pre-death when they're in hospice, all the way through the probate of the estate. It's free. You're able to go out, and once you register, it's private to you. So nobody else is seeing that, and you're able to share it with family members to help through it. So if you're out of town, it gives you resources in the community to help through that. Because if it's not laid out, if you've not communicated your final wishes, okay, if you've written out a document expressing is it burial, is it cremation, some of the topics that you've gone through in this series, the person now is stuck making the decision. Well, I don't know. I don't know if they wanted to be cremated and buried, where they wanted to be buried, what type of service they wanted. Okay, so again, it's laying out and helping them with that by writing it out, communicating it to a spouse and other related parties, whether it's children that are going to be making the decisions or some friends. So that's some of the paperwork that you have to have in place, and you're going to have a more extensive session on that next month. So assigning roles. So again, who do you trust? And this is the hard one because unfortunately, a lot of times it's going to be children, and you grew up with them and you now know all their bad habits. Okay? So now you're always leery. Well, my 50-year-old child, I don't know if they can handle it. Well, then you've got to figure out who is going to be able to make those financial decisions for you or take over if you're not able to. You know, because if you've been an executor, if you've been a power of attorney, just imagine not only running your finances, but you just doubled the burden by adding your own to somebody else's. So now you've got to figure out who can handle that, who's got the resources, has the attributes and abilities to work through that. If it's not children, is it other family members? Is it friends? Or can we go to some organizations that we'll talk about here in a little bit? So that's what you have to get into, is figuring that out. Because what you have to assign them is who's going to pay the bills. If some of it's automated, that's fine. Who's going to handle the investment decisions? Who's going to do the housing or medical decisions along the way? You can capture that if you have the discussions, and these are hard discussions. They're not easy, but you got to have them. You've got to work through it. That's part of that communication. If you do it before an event occurs, it manages the expectations. Okay? From your perspective, always just say, it's from my perspective, here's who I want handling this chore if need be. And you can name successors. What we normally talk about is if you're going to have a child, that they're close proximity, they should be able to handle it, and you could name another child to follow them as successor, but we recommend typically talking to your bank about being kind of the final one, because if the children are having health problems of their own or their situation is not going to allow it to happen, now they're like, well, now what do I do? So you can have a power of attorney, a successor person named, and maybe you name a bank to handle those duties. Yeah, you're going to have to pay a fee, but it's going to avoid some costly mistakes. Again, remember my example of the fraud, the scams, those are going to be less likely to happen when you have an organization as if they end up in that role to handle the bill paying or the investing or some of the other decisions there. So that's communication before that occurs and also where those records are at. I see a lot of people do durable power, medical power. Medical power is a primary example. Okay, I name my son, has medical power of attorney on me. I've got this great document. I'm driving along, I have a car accident. My document's at home. I can't make a decision, I'm unconscious. Okay? They call up my son, they've got the contact information, but they don't know if nobody can prove who has the right to make medical decisions. If I've named somebody to make the decisions, durable, financial, or medical, give them the document. They're the ones that need it. Okay? If you're incapacitated, it's doing you no good. You've got to get out those multiple copies to the people you've named. If you've named somebody as executor of in your will or successor trustee in a revocable living trust, have the discussion. Get them a copy of the document. They're the ones that are going to have to deal with it. Okay? And it's trying to get through that barrier of the privacy we tend to want, but we have to start bringing those people in to get past that. So also we're going to give them right to view transactions. So as we get to the point, we've seen this in a lot of cases from dementia, from Alzheimer's starting to set in, to just talked about the decline of intelligence along the way, having somebody have the right to view transactions. And all of a sudden they start seeing strange things happening, they can start having the discussion. You're starting to make decisions that aren't appropriate. And that's hard to realize, but that's giving that double check. Also checking for identity theft. So you can always get a free report from each of the 3 agencies through annualcreditreport.com. You can go out there, it takes you through a process. Most of you aren't going to need the credit score. They're going to try to sell you $8 to $10 for a credit score. You don't have to pay that. You got to answer some test questions to prove it's you, and then see if there's any, what you're looking for, is there any credit applications out there you didn't apply for? Are there any balances that are not yours, or addresses you or your children have never lived at? Because typically somebody that's going to set you up for identity theft is going to open up an address, an account at a different address, so all the statements go there, so you have no idea. Now that still doesn't protect you on your credit cards. You still got to go through your credit card statements and make sure all the charges are valid. If you do have identity theft, one of the primary places to go to is the Federal Trade Commission. It's a very good website. It helps you through the process when you do have identity theft and start protecting it. You can shut down your credit. You can file that nobody can apply for credit. And then if you go out to try to apply for credit, you got to remember, oh yeah, I shut it off. Okay? Because it's not that's one way to protect against it if need be. So we talked about also as you assign the roles out there, what are the trigger points? And some of the harder decisions in our society is, when am I going to give up the right to drive? If I start having more and more accidents, if I'm getting lost, I'm out driving around and I'm totally confused where I'm at, that may be signs that I have to do that. And that's, again, the communication with the family of when do I give up, how do I handle mobility then of getting around if I give up the right to drive. Also moving to retirement community, one of the issues, person in my financial planning study group still is a doctor, a medical doctor, and she's pretty straightforward. She has a great talk on this topic also, and her message is when you don't know where you are, it doesn't matter where you're living. Okay, so one of the factors you have to look at, the concept is you want to make that decision to move into a retirement community while you still have the energy to make it, because it's going to take some time and energy. You have to make the decision. Do you enjoy the environment? It's going to be a change in lifestyle. You've got to downsize materials, and the retirement communities have the resources to help in that downsizing, to help in that move. And it's just adapting mentally to the change in lifestyle. That's the big area that you really have to look at, and it's better to do that. Typically, what they're finding is they'll market to 70-year-olds, but most people prefer to stay in their own home as long as possible. And most of you probably agree with that. And it's typically in the 80s that we're seeing a lot of movement into retirement communities. Go out and seek professional assistance. So another website with good free information out there is Let's Make a Plan. This is the Certified Financial Planner site. This is their public education site. Again, you can pull on information there. So as you go out and you have that professional assistance from any number of people, banking relationship, insurance agent, investment broker, financial planner, all the different attorney, tax preparer, then what you want to work through with them is the roles they can play. So give you an example. So as a financial planner, we're working with a client and they're in a car accident, and the children call us up and say, okay, we don't even know who mom and dad's health insurance is with, and we have to get it processed with the medical organization or the hospital. Well, we have privacy laws, we can't tell them. Okay? What we can do is we then, if that's a scenario, it's a very narrow scenario, because once somebody's a medical power of attorney or a durable power of attorney, yeah, we can deal with them. If they're an executor or a successor trustee, we can now share that information. But in this rare instance I'm giving you, we can have them sign a document saying you are allowed to release certain information to these people, and if you want certain criteria. But most of the advisors don't think about this. All of a sudden they get the call and they realize because of privacy laws I can't release that information, and now it's tough to provide good service to the family. Incapacity form. So the children in most cases have the right to call us up to find out information going on. Now it's the opposite. Incapacity form, it's the client's money. They have the right to call up and say, I really like the neighbor boy, I'm going to give him $100,000. Really? We never really talked about this before. Well, if, again, we can't go out and share information as a financial advisor unless they've prepared an incapacity form with us that gives us the right to reach out to their family that they've assigned. Typically, it's the power of attorney that we can say, can you check on your mom and dad? Either somebody's holding them captive or we got a cognitive and decision-making issue to work through. So the incapacity form is now gives us the right, the advisors the right to reach out to named individuals. An agency account. So we're going to run into more and more situations that the children aren't available or trusted. There's really no friends or family available. Then you can go to a bank or a trust department, have an agency account where they'll handle the bill paying. So agency accounts are typically the bill paying part of it. You can go to the extent of having somebody handle the investments, all that through a trust department, and they handle the paying of your bills and that. Yeah, there's going to be charges there, but if you're avoiding that also, that's going to reduce costs if you're avoiding big mistakes. Same thing as an executor of a probate, of an estate at probate. A lot of times if they can end up naming a bank to be the probate executor to help reduce those costs also. Okay, those are kind of those backups. And then housing arrangements. Who's going to be the right to make decisions of where the housing at? There's going to be more and more decision making in this area. Can I be independent on my own? Do I need to just move into retirement community or assisted living, or at a point that I need full skilled care? Now, as you assign people, then start bringing them in to meet with your advisors, because they have to know who they can go to, what the relationship is, what role they play, because there's quite a few people in your life, whether it's attorneys, tax preparers, financial planners, investment brokers, insurance agents, the physician, if there's a social worker involved. Those are all people that they need to meet and get acquainted with. So we'll try to hold family meetings. The first one's maybe just meet and greet. But eventually, as aging occurs, we're going to ask permission. Can we essentially show your full financial plan to the named individuals, executor or power of attorney? Brings them up to speed what's going on, and they're involved in the process. That has paid off tremendously when we've seen issues of cognitive decline. The discussion is there, the communication is there, so now we can help protect the family wealth. That's really what it's all about. So foolish decisions aren't made, there's not big scams, we're not spending or handling money inappropriately, to have resources to provide for yourself individually, and if the desire is to pass it on to the next generation. Okay, so we've covered that 3 parts, some research on fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence, what are the warning signs, and just some of the practical steps.
Thank you for watching. For more information on the Embrace Aging series, please visit calvincommunity.org. We now invite you to discuss the following questions.